The rain was falling hard that night. Big drops of water hit the ground like tiny hammers. Jake rode his old delivery bike through the empty streets. Water splashed on his torn shoes and cheap jacket. He was cold, tired, and worried. In his delivery bag there was one last pizza. The address took him to the richest part of the city. Jake had never been to this area before. The houses here were huge. They had big gardens, tall gates, and bright lights everywhere. Jake looked at his phone again. He was already 1 hour late. The customer would be angry. He might lose his job. But the rain made everything slow. The roads were slippery and dangerous. Finally, he reached the address. His mouth fell open when he saw the house. No, it was not just a house. It was a mansion. Maybe the biggest mansion he had ever seen in his entire life. It had 3 floors, huge windows, and stone pillars at the front. Beautiful lights made the whole building glow like a palace. Jake felt scared. Rich people always made him nervous. They talked differently. They looked at poor people like him with cold eyes. But he had a job to do. He needed this money. His mother was waiting at home. She was sick and needed medicine. He got off his bike and walked to the huge front door. His hands were shaking. He didn't know if it was because of the cold rain or because he was nervous. He pressed the doorbell. It made a beautiful musical sound. A man in a black suit opened the door. He was a butler. He looked at Jake from head to toe. His eyes were cold and unfriendly. He looked at Jake's wet clothes and dirty shoes with disgust. "You're late," the butler said. His voice was sharp and mean. "I'm really sorry, sir," Jake said quickly. The rain was very heavy. The roads were. "I don't want excuses," the butler interrupted him. "Just bring the pizza to the dining room. Follow me. And don't touch anything." Jake followed the butler inside. His wet shoes made squeaky sounds on the shiny marble floor. He tried to walk carefully, but water dripped from his clothes. He felt embarrassed. The inside of the mansion was even more beautiful than the outside. There were huge paintings on the walls. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked perfect. Jake had never seen such wealth before. He lived in a tiny apartment with his mother. Their furniture was old and broken. They ate simple food every day. Sometimes they had no food at all. This mansion felt like a different world. A world where people like Jake didn't belong. The butler led him through a long hallway. Jake could hear voices and laughter coming from somewhere ahead. Rich people sounds. Happy sounds. Sounds of people who never worried about money or food or medicine. Then they reached the dining room. The butler pushed open the big wooden doors. Jake stepped inside and his whole world stopped. The dining room was enormous. A long table stood in the center. On the table there were plates, glasses, candles, and flowers. Everything looked like a picture from a magazine. But Jake didn't see any of that. He only saw one thing. One person. The man sitting at the head of the table. The man wore an expensive dark blue suit. His hair was neat and clean. A beautiful woman sat beside him. She wore a pearl necklace and a designer dress. 2 children sat across from them. A girl and a boy. Both wore clean, expensive clothes. They all looked perfect. Like a family from a television show. The man was laughing at something the woman said. His smile was big and warm. He looked happy. He looked comfortable. He looked rich. And he looked exactly like Jake's father. Jake's hands started to shake badly. The pizza box almost fell from his hands. His heart began to beat very fast. Too fast. He felt dizzy. He felt like he couldn't breathe. It was impossible. Couldn't be real. But Jake knew that face. He had stared at that face in an old photograph every single night for 10 years. The same brown eyes. The same shape of nose. The same smile. And there, above the left eyebrow, was the same small scar. The scar his father got when he fell from a tree as a child. His father had told him that story many times. But his father was dead. His mother told him. 10 years ago, when Jake was only 8 years old, his mother cried and said, "Your father died in a car accident. He's gone forever." Jake remembered that terrible night. He remembered crying. He remembered feeling like his heart was breaking. He remembered his mother holding him tight, both of them shaking with sadness. For 10 years, Jake lived without a father. For 10 years, he believed his father was in heaven. For 10 years, he missed him every single day. But now, his dead father was sitting in front of him. Alive, rich, with a completely different family. The man looked up. His eyes met Jake's eyes. For 1 second, maybe 2 seconds, they stared at each other. Jake saw something flash in the man's eyes. Recognition, fear, shock. The man's smile disappeared completely. His face turned white like paper. The glass in his hand started to shake. "Dad," Jake whispered. His voice was so soft, but in the silent room, everyone heard it. The beautiful woman stopped talking. The 2 children stopped eating. The butler stopped moving. Everyone turned to look at Jake. The entire room became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The man stared at Jake with wide eyes. His mouth opened but no words came out. Jake's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, it's me. It's Jake. Your son." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Jake was a small boy when his world fell apart. He was only 8 years old. It was a cold Tuesday evening in November. He remembered that day like it was yesterday. Every detail was burned into his memory forever. His mother came home early from work that day. That was strange. She never came home early. She always worked until nighttime. But that day, she walked through the door at 5 o'clock. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her face looked broken. Little Jake was sitting on the floor, playing with his toy cars. He looked up and smiled at his mother. But she didn't smile back. Instead, she fell to her knees and pulled him into her arms. She held him so tight that he could barely breathe. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Jake asked. Fear filled his small heart. "Your daddy," she whispered between sobs. "He's gone, baby. He's gone forever." "Gone where?" Jake asked. He didn't understand. "There was an accident. Car accident. Your father, he died, sweetheart. He's never coming back." Jake remembered screaming. He remembered crying until no more tears would come. He remembered his mother rocking him back and forth on the floor for hours. That night, something inside both of them broke into a million pieces. After that terrible day, life became very hard. Jake's father used to work at a factory. The money wasn't much, but it was enough. They could pay rent. They could buy food. They were poor, but they were together. But after his death, everything changed. His mother, Sarah, had to find work immediately. She had no education, no special skills. She could only do simple jobs that nobody else wanted to do. She started cleaning offices at night. Every evening at 8 o'clock, she would kiss Jake goodnight and leave. She came back at 4 in the morning, exhausted and smelling like cleaning chemicals. But she couldn't stop. She needed more money, so she took a second job. Every morning at 6 o'clock, she went to work at a grocery store. She stood behind the counter all day, scanning items and dealing with rude customers. Her feet hurt, her back ached, but she never complained. In the evenings, when other children played with their mothers, Jake watched his mother do laundry for the neighbors. She washed clothes by hand in a big bucket. Her hands became rough and red from the soap and water. Sometimes her fingers bled, but she kept working. Jake grew up fast, too fast. He learned to cook simple meals when he was 9 years old. He learned to clean the apartment. He learned to be alone. Most days, he only saw his mother for 1 or 2 hours. She was always working, always tired, always worried about money. They lived in a tiny apartment on the poor side of town. The building was old and dirty. The walls had cracks. The roof leaked when it rained. Sometimes they had no hot water. Sometimes the electricity stopped working. But it was all they could afford. Jake wore second-hand clothes from charity shops. His shoes always had holes in them. Other kids at school laughed at him. They called him poor. They said his clothes smelled bad. Jake learned to ignore them. He had bigger problems to worry about. Food was always a struggle. Some days they ate only bread and water. Some days they ate nothing at all. Jake's mother always gave him her portion of food. "I'm not hungry," she would lie with a smile. But Jake saw how thin she was becoming. He saw how weak she looked. Despite everything, Sarah never threw away all the memories of Jake's father. She burned most of the photos in anger and pain. She threw away his clothes. She destroyed almost everything that reminded her of him. But she kept one photograph. Just one. It was a small picture, bent at the corners and fading with age. In the photo, Jake's father held baby Jake in his strong arms. He was smiling at the camera with pure joy in his eyes. And there, clear as day, was the small scar above his left eyebrow. Jake kept that photo under his pillow. Every night before sleeping, he would take it out and stare at it. He would trace his finger over his father's face. "Good night, Dad," he would whisper to the picture. "I miss you." His mother told him stories about his father. "He called you his little champion," she would say with sad eyes. "He loved you so much. He would carry you everywhere. You were his whole world." Jake held onto those stories like treasure. They were all he had left of his father. Those stories and one fading photograph. When Jake turned 16, he made a difficult decision. He dropped out of school. His mother cried and begged him not to, but he was firm. "We need money, Mom," he said. "Your health is getting worse. I need to help." He found work as a delivery boy for a pizza shop. The pay was terrible. The hours were long. His boss was mean. But it was money. Every dollar helped. Now, at 18 years old, Jake worked 6 days a week. His hands were rough from holding the bike handles. His back hurt from carrying heavy delivery bags. But he never complained. He did it for his mother. Sarah's health was failing. She coughed all the time now. She could barely walk without getting tired. She needed to see good doctors. She needed expensive medicine. But they had no money for that. They could barely afford food. Jake saved every extra penny. He dreamed of one day having enough money to take his mother to a real hospital, to give her a comfortable life, to make her smile again without pain in her eyes. He worked hard. He never gave up hope. And he never forgot his father, the man in the photograph, the man who loved him, the man who died too soon, or so he thought, because now, standing in that giant mansion, delivering a pizza to rich people, Jake was staring at a ghost. His father wasn't dead. His father was alive, healthy, and wealthy, living in luxury while Jake and his mother struggled to survive. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. The truth was more painful than death itself. His father hadn't died. His father had abandoned them. He had chosen to leave. He had built a new life and forgotten about his old family completely. Jake felt his heart breaking all over again, just like that terrible Tuesday evening 10 years ago. But this time, the pain was worse. So much worse. Because death was final. Death was an accident. Death was something nobody could control. But this was a choice. A cruel, selfish choice that destroyed everything Jake believed in. The silence in the dining room felt like a heavy blanket pressing down on everyone. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the candle flames seemed to freeze in place. Jake stood there holding the pizza box. His whole body was shaking now. Tears were rolling down his cheeks. He couldn't stop them. 10 years of pain, 10 years of missing his father, 10 years of struggling. All of it came crashing down in this one terrible moment. The man at the table slowly stood up. His chair scraped against the floor with a loud, harsh sound that made everyone jump. His face had gone completely pale. He looked like he had seen a ghost. But Jake was not the ghost here. This man was. This man who was supposed to be dead. "Get out," the man said. His voice was quiet but hard as stone. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Those 2 words hurt more than anything in his entire life. Get out. Like Jake was nobody. Like Jake was trash. "But, Dad, it's me." Jake's voice cracked and broke. Fresh tears poured down his face. "It's Jake, your son. Don't you remember me?" The beautiful woman at the table put down her wine glass. Her hand was shaking. She looked at her husband with confused, frightened eyes. "Richard," she said slowly. "Richard. Who is this boy? Why is he calling you Dad?" Richard. So that was his name now. Not Michael Anderson anymore. Michael Anderson was dead. Now he was Richard Morrison. Rich man. Successful man. New man. He's nobody, Elizabeth, Richard said quickly. Too quickly. His voice was tight and nervous. Just a confused delivery boy. Probably on drugs or something. Drugs? Jake felt anger rising up inside him, mixing with the pain. I'm not on drugs. I'm your son. You know I'm your son. The two children at the table looked scared now. The little girl grabbed her mother's hand. The boys' eyes were wide and confused. They had no idea what was happening. They had no idea their perfect father was a liar. I've never seen you before in my life, Richard said, but his hands were shaking badly. He shoved them into his pockets to hide them. You need to leave my house right now. You have the same scar, Jake shouted. He was crying hard now, but he didn't care anymore. Let them all see. Let them all know the truth. Above your left eyebrow. You got it when you fell from a tree when you were 7 years old. You told me that story 100 times. Richard's hand automatically moved up to touch his eyebrow. His fingers found the small scar there. For just a second, his face showed everything. Memory, recognition, fear, guilt. But then he caught himself. He quickly dropped his hand and his face became cold again, like a door slamming shut. Stop this nonsense, Richard said, but his voice was shaking now. Mom's name is Sarah, Jake continued. He had to make this man admit the truth. He had to. We lived on Maple Street in apartment 2B. Our walls were yellow. You used to sing me songs before bed. You called me your little champion. Elizabeth stood up now too. Her face was white with shock. Richard, she whispered. Richard, what is he talking about? Nothing. He's talking about nothing. Richard's voice rose louder. He was almost shouting now. He's some crazy kid trying to scam us for money. Can't you see that? Scam you? Jake felt his heart breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. I don't want your money. I just want to know why. Why did you leave us? Why did you let Mom think you were dead? Security, Richard suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs. Security. Get in here now. Two large men in black uniforms came running into the room. They were big and strong. Their faces were serious and hard. These were Richard's bodyguards. Men paid to protect him from problems. And right now, Jake was a problem. Get this boy out of my house, Richard ordered them. He wouldn't even look at Jake anymore. Get him out and make sure he never comes back. The two security guards grabbed Jake's arms. Their grip was iron tight. It hurt. The pizza box fell from Jake's hands and hit the floor. The lid opened and pizza slices scattered across the expensive carpet. No, wait, please. Jake tried to pull away, but the guards were too strong. They started dragging him backward toward the door. His feet slid across the marble floor. Just tell me why. That's all I want to know. Just tell me why you left us. Jake saw the little girl crying now. She was scared and confused. The boy was hiding behind his mother. Elizabeth stood frozen, her hand covering her mouth in shock. She was staring at her husband like she didn't know him at all. Please, Dad. Jake was sobbing now, begging. The guards were pulling him out of the room. Please. Mom is sick. She's dying. We have no money for doctors. We needed you. We still need you. For just 1 second, Richard looked at Jake. Really looked at him. And in that moment, Jake saw everything in his father's eyes. He saw recognition. He saw memory. He saw pain and guilt and fear all mixed together. He saw tears starting to form in his father's eyes. But then Richard turned his head away. He turned his whole body away so he didn't have to look at Jake anymore. I don't know you, Richard said again. His voice was barely a whisper now. I don't know you. Those 4 words destroyed Jake completely. They were worse than any punch. Worse than any weapon. His own father, standing right there, alive and well, was choosing to pretend Jake didn't exist. The security guards dragged Jake through the hallway. His vision was blurry from tears. He could barely see where they were going. They pulled him through the beautiful house with its expensive paintings and crystal chandeliers. past the marble floors and golden decorations. They dragged him to the front door and threw him outside into the rain. Jake fell onto the wet ground. His hands and knees hit the hard concrete. Pain shot through his body, but he barely felt it. The physical pain was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. The huge mansion door slammed shut behind him with a loud bang. The sound felt final, like a coffin closing. Jake stayed there on the ground in the pouring rain. Water soaked through his clothes. It mixed with his tears. He couldn't tell where the rain ended and his crying began. Inside that warm, beautiful mansion, his father was going back to his perfect life, his perfect wife, his perfect children, his perfect lie. And outside in the cold rain, Jake was alone, just like he had been for the past 10 years. But this time it was worse, so much worse, because now he knew the truth. His father didn't die in an accident. His father chose to leave, chose to abandon him, chose to forget he ever existed. The rain kept falling. The thunder rolled across the sky, and Jake's whole world shattered into a million pieces that could never be put back together again. Jake didn't remember how he got home that night. His body moved automatically. His hands gripped the bike handles. His feet pushed the pedals. But his mind was somewhere else, lost in a fog of shock and pain. When he finally reached the small apartment building, he parked his bike and just sat there in the rain. Water dripped from his hair, his clothes, his fingers. He stared at nothing. His brain couldn't process what had just happened. Finally, he forced himself to stand up. His legs felt weak, like they might collapse at any moment. He climbed the old stairs to apartment 2B. Each step felt like climbing a mountain. Inside the apartment, his mother was already sleeping. He could hear her coughing through the thin bedroom wall. That terrible cough that never went away. The cough that kept getting worse because they couldn't afford proper medicine. Jake went to his tiny room. It was barely big enough for a mattress on the floor and a small broken table. He sat down on the mattress and just stared at the cracked ceiling. Sleep didn't come. How could it? His mind was racing with 1,000 questions, 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 emotions all crashing together like waves in a storm. Around 3 in the morning, Jake pulled out his phone. His hands were still shaking. He opened the internet browser and typed in the address of that mansion. Within seconds, results flooded his screen. Morrison Estate, one of the most expensive properties in the city. He clicked on the first link. It was a news article from 2 years ago. There was a photograph. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His father stood in the picture wearing an expensive suit and a confident smile. Next to him was Elizabeth, the beautiful woman from dinner. Both were holding a large check for charity. The headline read, "Tech millionaire Richard Morrison donates $500,000 to Children's Hospital. $500,000 for charity." While Jake's mother coughed herself to sleep every night because they couldn't afford a simple doctor's visit. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Anger burned in his chest like fire. But he kept reading. He had to know everything. Richard Morrison, age 42, owner and CEO of Morrison Tech Company. The company designed software for hospitals and medical centers. They were worth millions, maybe billions. Married to Elizabeth Morrison for 15 years. 2 children, Emma, age 12, and Thomas, age 10. Jake did the math in his head. 15 years married. But Jake himself was 18 years old. That meant his father left when Jake was only 3 years old. A baby. A tiny child who barely understood the world. His father abandoned a 3-year-old boy and never looked back. Jake felt sick to his stomach. He ran to the small bathroom and threw up. His whole body shook with sobs. He pressed his hand against his mouth to stay quiet. He couldn't wake his mother. She didn't need to know about this. Not yet. Maybe not ever. When the sun started to rise, Jake was still awake. His eyes were red and swollen from crying. But now the tears had stopped. Now there was only determination. He needed answers. Real answers. Not denials. Not lies. The truth. At 6 in the morning, Jake quietly left the apartment. His mother was still sleeping. He took the bus across town to the public library. It was old and dusty, but it had computers and internet access. Jake sat down at a computer in the corner and started searching. He searched for hours. He typed different names, different keywords, different combinations. Michael Anderson. That was his father's real name. The name before he became Richard Morrison. Jake typed Michael Anderson missing and the name of their old town. The screen filled with results. Jake clicked on the first one. It was a newspaper article from 15 years ago. His eyes scanned the words rapidly. Local man Michael Anderson missing. Presumed dead after car found in river. The article was short and simple. Michael Anderson, age 27, went missing on March 15th. His car was found crashed through a barrier into the river. The doors were open. No body was found inside. Police searched the river for 3 days. They used divers and boats and special equipment. But they found nothing. The current was strong. The water was deep and dark. After 1 week, the police officially declared Michael Anderson dead. They assumed his body was washed away by the river and lost forever. The case was closed. Jake read the article 3 times. 4 times. 5 times. Each time, the truth became clearer and more horrible. His father had planned this. Every detail was calculated. Drive the car into the river. Make it look like an accident. Leave the doors open so it seemed like the body washed away. Disappear completely. Then what? Change his name. Move to a different city. Start a completely new life. Marry a rich woman. Build a company. Become someone else entirely. Erase Michael Anderson. Create Richard Morrison. Forget about the wife and baby son left behind. Jake's hands trembled as he kept searching. He found more articles. More pieces of the puzzle. One article mentioned that Michael Anderson worked at a factory. He had no education beyond high school. He was poor and struggling. The article interviewed his devastated wife, Sarah, who was left alone with a young child. Jake found another article from 10 years later. It was about Morrison Tech Company winning an award. Richard Morrison was in the photo, shaking hands with the mayor. Rich, successful, happy. 2 different men, 2 different lives, but the same face, the same scar above the left eyebrow. Jake printed out every article he could find. He created a timeline, every piece of evidence, every photograph, every detail that proved Richard Morrison was once Michael Anderson. By noon, Jake had a thick folder full of papers. Proof, evidence, truth. But what would he do with it? Go to the police? Tell them that a dead man was actually alive? That a millionaire had faked his death 15 years ago? Would they even believe him? Richard Morrison was powerful. He had money, lawyers, connections. Jake was nobody. A poor delivery boy with no proof except some old newspaper articles and a strong family resemblance. Jake sat in the library, staring at the folder in his hands. His mind raced with possibilities. He could expose his father to the world. Destroy his perfect life just like his father destroyed Jake's childhood. But then what? His father would go to jail maybe. His company would collapse. Elizabeth and those 2 innocent children would suffer. And Jake's mother? She would find out that her husband didn't die in an accident. He chose to leave her. He chose poverty for them and wealth for himself. That truth would break her heart all over again. Jake put his head in his hands. This was too big, too complicated, too painful. But one thing was clear. He couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not after seeing his father alive and well, living in luxury while his mother slowly died from an illness they couldn't afford to treat. Jake needed to confront his father again. Face to face. Man to man. And this time, he wouldn't let security guards throw him out. This time, he would get real answers. His father owed him that much. After 15 years of lies, after 15 years of abandonment, after 15 years of pretending to be dead, his father owed him the truth. Jake gathered all his papers and left the library. The afternoon sun was bright and warm. People walked past him, laughing and talking, living normal lives. They had no idea that Jake's entire world had been turned upside down. He took the bus back home. His mother was awake now, sitting at the small kitchen table. She looked tired and sick as always. "Jake, where were you?" she asked weakly. You didn't come to bed last night. Just working, Mom, Jake lied. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. But what else could he say? Extra deliveries. Making more money. She smiled at him. That sad, tired smile that broke his heart every time. You work too hard, baby. You should rest. I'm okay, Mom. I promise. But Jake wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. His whole life had been built on a lie. And now he had to decide what to do with the terrible truth he had discovered. 3 days passed like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Jake couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's face. That cold expression. Those words, I don't know you. His mother noticed something was wrong. Jake, are you sick? She asked with worried eyes. You look so pale. You barely touch your food. I'm fine, Mom, he lied again. The lies were piling up now, just like his father's lies. Jake hated it. But what choice did he have? On the 4th day, Jake made a decision. He woke up early, before sunrise. He put on his best clothes. They were old and cheap, a faded shirt his mother had ironed carefully and pants with a small tear near the knee that she had stitched up. But they were clean. They were the best he had. He looked at himself in the cracked bathroom mirror. His eyes had dark circles under them from not sleeping. His face looked thin and tired. He looked exactly like what he was, a poor boy from the streets. But he stood up straight. He lifted his chin. He had every right to face his father. Blood was blood. Truth was truth. Money couldn't change that. Jake took the bus to the business district downtown. The buildings here were tall and made of glass and steel. Everything looked expensive and modern. People in suits walked quickly, talking on phones, carrying briefcases. Jake felt out of place. People looked at him strangely. His cheap clothes stood out among all the designer suits and polished shoes. But he kept walking. He had come too far to turn back now. Morrison Tech Company occupied the entire 20th floor of the tallest building. Jake stood outside for almost an hour watching people go in and out. His heart pounded in his chest. His palms were sweating. Finally, at exactly 5 o'clock in the evening, the doors opened and Richard Morrison walked out. He was talking on his phone, laughing about something. 2 bodyguards walked beside him. He looked relaxed, happy, like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't destroyed a family 15 years ago. Jake stepped directly into his father's path. Please, he said. His voice came out stronger than he expected. Just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Richard stopped walking. The smile disappeared from his face. He looked at Jake and his whole body went stiff. For a moment, Jake thought his father would just walk away, or call the bodyguards to remove him. But something in Jake's eyes must have reached him. Something desperate and determined. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he raised his hand to stop the bodyguard who was moving forward. Walk with me, Richard said quietly. His voice sounded tired, defeated. They walked in silence to a small park nearby. Office workers sat on benches eating late lunches. Children played on swings. Everything seemed so normal. But nothing about this moment was normal. Richard sat down on an empty bench. Jake sat beside him, keeping some distance between them. For a long time, neither spoke. They just sat there, 2 strangers who shared the same blood. I was poor, Richard finally said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Very, very poor. Your mother and I, we lived in that tiny apartment. We could barely afford food. Every month we struggled to pay rent. Every day was a fight just to survive. Jake stayed silent, listening. When you were born, I was terrified. Richard's hands were shaking. He clasped them together tightly. I had no education. I worked at a factory for minimum wage. I had no skills, no prospects, no future. I looked at you, this tiny baby, and all I could think was, I'm going to fail him. I'm going to let him down. He deserves better than a father like me. So you left, Jake said. His voice was hard, cold. I met a man, Richard continued. He still wasn't looking at Jake. He stared straight ahead at nothing. A businessman. He saw something in me, I guess. some potential I didn't even know I had. He offered me a deal, a chance at a new life. But there was a condition. What condition? I had to leave everything behind. Everyone. He said it was the only way. He said people from the past would hold me back, keep me in poverty forever. He said if I really wanted to succeed, I needed to cut all ties. Start completely fresh. Jake felt his anger rising. So you chose money over your family. I chose survival. Richard's voice rose for the first time. He turned to face Jake finally. His eyes were red. I convinced myself that you and your mother would be better off without me. That Sarah could find someone better. Someone who could actually provide. Someone who wasn't a failure. She never found anyone, Jake said quietly. She worked 3 jobs, every single day. Her hands bled from washing clothes. Her feet swelled from standing all day at the grocery store. She cleaned toilets at night so I could eat. And now she's sick, really sick. We can't afford doctors. We can't afford medicine. She's dying, and I can't do anything to save her. Richard put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Was he crying? I sent money, Richard said through his hands. For years I sent money. Anonymous money orders. Every month. The man who helped me, he promised he would deliver them to your mother. He said it had to be anonymous so it couldn't be traced back to me. So my new identity would stay safe. Jake felt like he'd been punched. We never received anything. Not $1. Not ever. Richard's head snapped up. His face showed pure shock. What? That's impossible. I sent thousands. For years. Every month without fail. That man lied to you, Jake said. He probably kept the money for himself. And you never even checked. You never came to see if we were okay. You just trusted a stranger with our lives. The truth hung in the air between them like poison. You want to know what I think? Jake continued. His voice was shaking with emotion now. I think part of you was relieved. Relieved that you didn't have to face us. Relieved that you could pretend we didn't exist. You didn't send that money because you loved us. You sent it to make yourself feel better. To ease your guilt. That's not true, Richard whispered. But his voice had no strength. Isn't it? You have a new family now. A beautiful wife. Perfect children. A mansion. Company. You built a whole new life. And we were just ghosts from your past. Mistakes you wanted to forget. Richard stood up suddenly. He walked a few steps away, his back to Jake. His whole body was tense. I want to help now, he said. Your mother's treatment. I'll pay for everything. The best doctors. The best hospitals. Whatever she needs. We don't need your guilt money. Jake stood up too. His hands were clenched into fists. Not to fight. Just from the emotion burning inside him. Then what do you want? Richard turned around. Tears were streaming down his face now. Tell me what you want from me. I want to know one thing, Jake said. Does your wife know? Does Elizabeth know about me? About Mom? Does she know that you faked your death and abandoned your family? Richard's silence was the answer. Tell her, Jake said. Each word came out hard and clear. If you really want to make things right, if you really want to help, then stop living this lie. Tell Elizabeth the truth. Tell your children who you really are. Stop being a coward. If I tell them, I'll lose everything, Richard said. His voice broke. Good, Jake said coldly. Now you know how we felt 15 years ago when we lost you. Now you know how it feels to have your whole world fall apart. Maybe then you'll understand what you did to us. Jake turned and started walking away. Wait, Richard called after him. Please, Jake, wait. But Jake didn't stop. He didn't look back. He walked away from his father just like his father had walked away from him all those years ago. Behind him, he heard Richard crying. Loud, broken sobs that echoed through the park. But Jake didn't feel sorry for him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. His father had made his choices. Now he would have to live with the consequences. That evening, Richard Morrison sat in his car outside his mansion for almost an hour. The engine was off. The silence was heavy. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that his knuckles turned white. Through the large windows of his house, he could see his family. Elizabeth was in the kitchen, probably preparing dinner. Emma was doing homework at the dining table. Thomas was watching television in the living room. His perfect family. His perfect life. Built on lies. Richard closed his eyes. Jake's words kept repeating in his mind like a broken record. Tell her the truth. Stop being a coward. He thought about Sarah, the woman he had married 20 years ago. She had been so young, so full of hope back then. She had believed in him when nobody else did. She had loved him despite his poverty, despite his failures. And how did he repay that love? By abandoning her. By letting her think he was dead. By letting her struggle alone while he lived in luxury. Richard opened his eyes and looked at his hands. These hands had signed million-dollar contracts. These hands had built a successful company. But these same hands had also destroyed a family. He thought about little Jake, the baby he used to hold, the child who called him daddy with pure love in his eyes. That baby was now a broken young man, working as a delivery boy, watching his mother die slowly because they couldn't afford medical care, while Richard donated $500,000 to charity for a photo opportunity. The guilt crashed over him like a tsunami. For 15 years, he had pushed these feelings down, buried them deep, told himself that he had made the right choice, that everyone was better off. But he had been lying to himself, just like he had been lying to everyone else. Richard finally got out of the car. His legs felt heavy as he walked to the front door. Each step felt like walking toward his own execution, because that's what this was. The death of Richard Morrison. The death of his carefully constructed life. He opened the door and stepped inside. The smell of cooking food filled the air. Elizabeth was humming softly in the kitchen. Thomas was laughing at something on TV. Emma was chewing on her pencil, concentrating on her math problems. Normal. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. In a few minutes, it would all be destroyed. "Dad's home," Thomas shouted, running over to hug him. Richard hugged his son back. His heart ached. This innocent child had no idea what was coming. None of them did. "Richard, dinner will be ready in 20 minutes," Elizabeth called from the kitchen. "How was your day?" "Elizabeth," Richard's voice came out strange, shaky. "Can you come here, please? I need to talk to everyone. It's important." Elizabeth appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. She took one look at Richard's face and her smile faded. "What's wrong? You look terrible. Are you sick? Please, just sit down. All of you." The tone in his voice made everyone stop what they were doing. Elizabeth sat down slowly on the couch. Emma closed her textbook and came over. Thomas turned off the television. All three of them looked at Richard with worried, confused faces. Richard stood in front of them. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. "I need to tell you something," he began. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you a long time ago. Something that's going to change everything." "Richard, you're scaring me," Elizabeth said. Her face was pale. "What is it? Are you sick? Is it cancer?" "No, it's worse than that." Richard took a deep breath. "My name isn't Richard Morrison." Silence. "What?" Elizabeth blinked. "What are you talking about? 15 years ago, before I met you, I was someone else. My real name is Michael Anderson. I was married. I had a son, a baby boy named Jake." Elizabeth stood up slowly. Her face showed pure shock. What are you saying?" "I faked my death," Richard continued. The words tumbled out now like water from a broken dam. "I drove my car into a river. I made it look like an accident. Then I disappeared. I changed my name. I left my wife and my son and I never looked back." "No," Elizabeth whispered. "No, this isn't real. This is some kind of joke." "I wish it was," Richard said. Tears started rolling down his face. "But it's true. All of it. That delivery boy who came here a few days ago, the one who called me dad, that was Jake, my son. He's 18 years old now. And I looked him in the eyes and told him I didn't know him." Emma started crying. Thomas looked confused and scared. Elizabeth just stared at Richard like he was a stranger. For 15 years, I've been living a lie, Richard sobbed. My wife, my first wife, Sarah, she's out there right now. She's sick, dying. They have no money. They live in poverty. She worked 3 jobs to raise our son alone, while I was here, living in this mansion, pretending they didn't exist. Elizabeth's hand went to her mouth. Her whole body was shaking. I'm sorry. Richard fell to his knees. I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I am a coward. I destroyed my family. And then I built a new life with you based on complete lies. Did you ever love me? Elizabeth asked. Her voice was ice cold. Or was I just part of your new identity? Part of your disguise? I do love you, Richard cried. I love all of you, but that doesn't change what I did. That doesn't make it right. Elizabeth looked at him with eyes full of betrayal and disgust. 15 years, she said slowly. Our entire marriage, everything we built together, all of it was a lie. Elizabeth, please, don't. She held up her hand. Her voice was sharp as broken glass. Don't say another word to me. She turned to her children. Emma was sobbing. Thomas looked terrified. Elizabeth's face softened as she looked at them. Come on, babies, she said gently. Go pack some clothes. We're leaving. Leaving? Thomas asked in a small voice. Where are we going? To Grandma's house. Just for a while. Elizabeth kept her voice calm, but her hands were shaking. Go on now. Pack your things. The children ran upstairs, still crying. Emma kept looking back at her father with hurt and confusion in her eyes. When they were gone, Elizabeth turned back to Richard. You have a son out there, she said. Her voice was filled with controlled rage. A sick woman who raised your child alone while you lived here in luxury. How could you? How could you do that and sleep at night? I don't know, Richard whispered. I don't know. You're not the man I thought you were, Elizabeth said. I don't even know who you are. Richard Morrison doesn't exist. He never did. You're just Michael Anderson, a coward who ran away from his responsibilities. I'll make it right, Richard begged. I'll help them. I'll pay for Sarah's treatment. With my money? Elizabeth cut him off. Half of everything you own is mine, Richard. Or should I call you Michael? Half of this company, this house, everything, it's mine. I helped you build this life, and now I'm taking my half and leaving. Please don't go. Richard reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I need to protect my children, Elizabeth said coldly. They've just found out their father is a liar who abandoned his first family. They need stability. They need to be away from you. She walked toward the stairs, then paused and looked back. You should go to them, she said quietly. Your first family. The one you threw away. They're the ones who deserve your help. Not us. We'll be fine without you. Elizabeth. Goodbye, Richard. Or Michael. Or whoever you really are. She went upstairs. Richard heard doors closing. Suitcases being zipped. His children's voices asking questions their mother couldn't answer. 30 minutes later, Elizabeth came down the stairs with Emma and Thomas. Each of them carried a small bag. The children's eyes were red from crying. They wouldn't even look at their father. Say goodbye to your father, Elizabeth told them. Bye, Dad. They whispered together. Their voices were small and broken. Richard tried to hug them, but they pulled away. That hurt more than anything else. He watched through the window as they got into Elizabeth's car. He watched as the car pulled out of the driveway. He watched until the taillights disappeared into the darkness. Then he was alone, completely alone, in his big, empty mansion. For the first time in 15 years, Richard Morrison felt the full weight of his choices. The lies, the betrayal, the destruction he had caused. He fell to his knees in the middle of his expensive living room and cried. He cried for Sarah, for Jake, for the family he had abandoned. He cried for Elizabeth and his children, who now saw him as a monster. And he cried for himself, for the man he used to be, for the man he could have been. Everything he had built was crumbling. His perfect life was falling apart. And he deserved every bit of it.